Okay. Hi, everyone. Feel free to take a seat. There are a few over there. It's great to see all of you. It's great to have such an amazing turnout this evening, and welcome to this evening's program. We are so delighted to be hosting at Shir Tikva the Shalom Hartman Institute, and most especially its president, Rabbi Dr. Donniel Hartman, sharing his perspective on understanding Israel today and imagining the Israel of tomorrow. I'm Judy Kay, in case you don't know who I am. I'm a 30-plus year member of Shir Tikva, and I've had the privilege of being a longtime leader in the greater Boston Jewish community. Why am I standing here tonight? Because Rabbi Danny is unfortunately in the air as this event is happening. However, he sends his best wishes to everyone, and he's so pleased about Temple Shir Tikva and the Hartman Institute partnering together for this event. So, a little about our guests and the Shalom Hartman Institute. The Institute, based in Jerusalem, is a leading center of Jewish thought and education serving Israel and North America. Its mission is to strengthen Jewish peoplehood, identity, and pluralism, to enhance the Jewish and democratic character of Israel, and to ensure that Judaism is a compelling force for good in the 21st century. Its North American affiliate guides, oversees, and brings Hartman research, educational programming, and curricula to the North American Jewish community. If you haven't heard of it, you've probably heard of many of the luminaries who are on its faculty. Check them out on the website. So, a word about our guests tonight and our program. Rabbi Dr. Donniel Hartman is the president of the Shalom Hartman Institute, and he holds the Kaufman Family Chair in Jewish Philosophy. He is the host of the award-winning podcast For Heaven's Sake, maybe you've listened to it, together with his colleague Yossi Klein Halevi, which ranks consistently as the most popular Judaism podcast in most English-speaking countries. He's also the author of several books, including his latest, Who Are the Jews and Who Can We Become?, which was a 2023 Jewish Book Council Award finalist. He writes and speaks extensively about Judaism, Israel, and the contemporary world. He has, okay, here we go, bear with me, a PhD in Jewish philosophy from Hebrew University, an MA in political philosophy from New York University, an MA in religion from Temple University, and rabbinic ordination from the Shalom Hartman Institute. We are also so happy to have with us tonight Dr. Josh Levison. Josh, are you over there? Who is the director of Boston for the Shalom Hartman Institute of North America. Josh oversees all of the Hartman activities in the Boston area, and he's been a wonderful partner for us as we've planned this program. He grew up in Brookline, and he returned here this summer to join the Hartman team. Before that, he worked in Jewish day schools for 25 years, including 17 years as heads of different Jewish day schools in Maryland and Michigan. He's locally educated with a BA and PhD from Harvard, and he's taught extensively in both formal and informal settings at the high school, college, and adult levels. So our program this evening is a conversation featuring Rabbi Hartman with our own Dan Brosgol, who is well known to many of you. Dan is the executive director here at Temple Shir Tikva. He's also served in leadership roles at the Rashi School, Kessler Newton, and Hebrew College, and is currently pursuing his doctorate in education at Northeastern University. Dan's been a writer for JewishBoston.com for 14 years and also serves on the Bedford Select Board. His Hartman connection runs deep, as he was involved in the launch of their teen gap year program, Chevruta, in 2016. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Thanks so much, Judy and Donniel. Welcome to Shir Tikva. It is really a privilege to welcome you here this evening. We are here to have you reflect with us on the situation in Israel, the ongoing interplay of Israeli and American Judaisms, and how you're working and how we can work as well to create a stronger and more vibrant Israel. That was always important work for American Jews, going back to early days of Zionism, but now it's more important than ever, given what has happened and what is happening on both sides of that relationship. Thank you for making time for us, and thank you to TSD's own Judy Kay and Josh Levison and Jesse Steinman from the Shalom Hartman Institute for making tonight possible. This is Hartman's first ever event in Metro West, and it goes without saying that we are extremely honored and proud to welcome you. Over 150 people in the sanctuary are excited to hear from you and not from me, so I'll try to ask you some questions and stay out of your way as you share your thoughts with us. So baruch haba. And we'll go right to the hard stuff first. My first question.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. You're
Thank
welcome.
you, and it's nice to be here.
Excellent. For those of us who have not been to Israel,
I have no idea where I am, by the way. I just like it's sunny. Hi, though.
The happiest place on earth. For those of us who have not been to Israel since October 7th, it's hard to understand the combined impact of the initial massacre, the ongoing plight of the hostages, the war and its execution, the casualties, and the economy. How is civil society surviving? How much longer can it go on like this? And has a recent ceasefire done anything to change the atmosphere? That's one question. Not
Um, I'm going to start with how much longer. On the one hand, the answer is as long as necessary. Um, we're strong. Israelis are a remarkably strong and resilient people. And we'll do whatever we need to do. Um, what Israel demands of us is impossible. It is. You know, my oldest worker at the Hartman Institute was 93 years old. And I went to his grandson's funeral. That's too much. That's just too much. And it just demands it of you. Almost all of my faculty have either children or spouses um, who've been in harm's way for at least 200 days. That's not normal. They don't sleep. I have to allow every one of my faculty, and I said it, you have to do as much as you can do. Nobody's going to be let go for underachieving. Getting out of bed is an achievement. You can come to work in 10 you can come to work, don't come to work. You can come to work 10%, 20%, 30%. You're going to set what you can do. That's not normal. You know, it's so on the one hand, Israel is a great country. It's like my life. I moved to Israel when I was 13, 1971. I wouldn't choose to live anywhere else in the world. I love living in Israel. I don't feel I'm sacrificing by living in Israel. But it's still very, very hard. I still remember, like, literally on my body, like, you know, your body remembers, you know, physically. I could remember the first moment my son was in harm's way. First moment when he was in the army. And I remember they were calling him to go to checkpoints in Judea and Samaria. Like, I said, no, I'll go instead of you. Like, that's my job. I'm an Abba. That's what you're an Abba supposed to do that. Your kid doesn't do that. It's hard. But one of the things about Israel is we do whatever we have to do. It needs to be done. That's what we're going to do. Part of the challenge right now is it's not self-evident what needs to be done. When it's clear, like, we're all in. When the mission is clear, the values are clear, the purpose is clear. When we are the Israel Defense Forces, Israel shows up, or most of Israel shows up. And when you see that, it's like it's an honor to walk in the midst of this people who do that. It truly is. Like, you see, it's just 200. Yeah, my husband was just called up for another 60 days, and she's getting like it's. So we'll do whatever we need to do. But the challenge that we're facing now is that it's not clear what we should be doing. The justice of October 7th of our response wasn't questioned by anybody in Israel. It was a war of self-defense and an expression of our right to be free and to be safe. And sometimes war is a moral obligation. It's a moral obligation. Because if all human beings are created in the image of God, so am I. I have a right. And everybody showed up. Every part of Israeli society drafted and did whatever they could. It's now 424 days later. Everybody, by the way, also accepted the justice of the war in Lebanon. That we had reached a position where there was a terrorist organization which was making life unlivable for over 1 million Israelis. Can't sustain that. Now, in Lebanon, we declared, here I'm now going to get, and I apologize, I am very, very intense, and I put it on the table. So I might be a little too much for some people. So I apologize. But I'm 66 and I can't change. And my mother loves me. My wife debates, but my mother. And everybody knows that if your mother loves you, you're okay. We declared a ceasefire in Lebanon without achieving the goals that we had put forth for ourselves. We achieved some of the goals. But we didn't limit the ability of Hezbollah to continue to fire on any city, village from Haifa to the north for the next 5 years. For the next 5 years, they still have the ability to completely upend life for 1.5 million Israelis at least. So our goal was to return security to the north. That was the primary goal. We didn't achieve that goal. We achieved other remarkable things. Turns out that they had prepared and dug and armed and prepped a massive invasion, which would have made October 7th seem like a ride in Disney Park. So we stopped that. Most of us didn't even know that that was on the table. We destroyed most of their precision missiles. But when you destroy 80%, the significant question is not the percentage. It's a percentage out of what? And when they still have over 30,000 missiles that could hit, it's legitimate if they're not dying in vain. You want my kid? Only if his life is sacred. And only if you endanger him, because by endangering him, you're directly enhancing the safety of our country. And we could have fought for another 2 years. And what we achieved today would be no different than 2 years from now. The sad reality is we live in a neighborhood with people who want to kill us. And I can't change that reality. I don't know how to do that. And certainly military force doesn't do that. It doesn't. So we declared a ceasefire because we achieved what we could achieve. We understand the importance of power, the gift of power, and the limitations of power. The challenge now is, why aren't we using that rationale in Gaza? because we've achieved all that we're going to achieve in Gaza. We're not going to wipe out Hamas, even if in the next 5 years. And for every Hamas terrorist we kill, they draft new ones. You see, the humanitarian aid that we have to offer, not because it's good for our public relations and the world is pushing us, but because there are civilians in Gaza who have a right to have access to food. And they might not like me. They might not be Judophiles. But as long as they aren't combatants, which means that as long as you don't have the intent and the means to kill me, I am not allowed to use military force or deadly force against you. But that humanitarian aid is providing Hamas with hundreds of millions of dollars every few months. They don't need Qatari money anymore as long as they have humanitarian aid, which is provided for free. They hijack it and then they sell it. They are flush. Is that the term? Flush with cash?
Flush with cash.
Flush with cash. In a society where there are no buildings, there are no jobs, there is no industry. And if you offer people from 15 to 25 some money and 1 week of training, you're in. We've reached, I believe, the end of what we could achieve militarily in Gaza. And if you ask me then, for how long? I already saw, we're all in, but if we're not going to help, I don't want to send my child and my husband and my daughter and my kid. I just don't want to do that. And in Gaza, it's starting to get complicated. And a lot of other ideologies are coming to play now when it comes to Gaza. The reasons why we started the war are not necessarily the reasons why we're continuing the war. We can't militarily free the hostages. We can't do it. There's a major area, neighborhood in Gaza where the army is not going in, because we know that that's where many of the hostages are being held. And the minute we go in, they're going to be murdered. We can't free them. No Entebbe. We just can't do it. Does the name Nachshon Wachsman mean anything to anybody here? I don't know. With COVID, I don't remember time anymore. So it might be 20 years or so. An Israeli soldier was kidnapped in the West Bank. And he was held hostage in the West Bank. And Israeli special forces knew where he was. They encircled the house. And they're unbelievably skilled. And they had a plan. We were going to save him. They had the blueprints of the building. And they know that there is a certain, turns out there's a Torah about this, there's a certain amount of time that you have between when you attack and the fog of war and the terror, and even someone who's ready to commit suicide, until they activate it, you have a certain amount of seconds, and they had enough time to do what needed to be done. What they didn't know, unbeknownst to them, is that the terrorists added a second metal door. So when they breached the outside door and they came to the room, they didn't know that there was another metal door there. And they needed another 30 seconds. And in those 30 seconds, they killed Nachshon Wachsman. Welcome to the tunnels of Gaza. We don't have the required time necessary for an operation. We can't save them. So to continue to fight to bring them back alive, it's not happening. Are we pressuring? Maybe. I don't know what's pressuring Hamas right now. We killed Sinwar. Has that changed dramatically their ability to function and their demands? Now, in another week, we might find out that something changes because we only know what we can know as we know it. But right now, it's not clear. Like, what are we doing? For some people, they want to continue to fight in Gaza for revenge. October 7th has created a deep desire for revenge. And for some, it hasn't been satiated yet. For some people, October 7th has created a deep insecurity. And they're looking for some notion of safety, and they don't know yet how to achieve it. But maybe if the army controls, that'll give us a little more safety. For some people, they want to resettle Gaza as part of the Holy Land to enable the redemption of Israel and the coming of the Messiah. Now, I'm not into that war. I'm not into the war for revenge anymore. So, Israeli society is at a crossroad. The ceasefire in Lebanon put forth a model which should apply to Gaza. And you see people are getting tired. Now, if a danger arises, everybody's going to show up again. But to occupy, just to fight another day because our politicians aren't willing to admit that we won, it's starting to get a little more complicated. Starting to get a little more complicated now. And Israel today is it's at a crossroads, I believe. For the right cause, we will show up. But it's not sure anymore that it's the right cause or what is the right cause. Hi, everyone.
So from one easy question to another, it's a two-part about Bibi, and I'll ask them both, and you can answer whatever order you want. So here's the first part. So for the first half a year or so after October 7th, it felt like the reckoning was coming. Many felt his days were numbered because the court cases or the failures of the military or the intelligence failures. Yet here he is, basking in the glow of some audacious intelligence successes with what some view as a successful execution of war aims in Lebanon. So my first of the two-part questions are, what is the feeling of the opposition vis-a-vis Bibi's longevity? Is there hope or hopelessness? On this side of the ocean, many young adults have grown up knowing only Israel as a powerful country and Bibi as the only prime minister. This is very different than many of my generation and older. How does this affect their relationship with Israel, and how can we help them develop a more positive relationship with Israel when so many of them are so profoundly turned off by Netanyahu and the coalition and increasingly the war?
So, first of all, thank you for these unbelievably thoughtful questions. They're like off the charts in their thoughtfulness and nuance. So first of all, my challenge is now to remember them. But I enjoyed listening to them.
I have more.
If you think about them, these are each one of them. Could we make them two?
They were two, but I wanted to give you a chance to grapple with both.
Okay,
as we're thinking about the other.
I want to just put my head around one, and then the second one
is... So in Israel, hope or hopelessness?
In Israel. Yeah. Netanyahu is in power till 2026. Nobody questions, by the way, his success in navigating the war in Lebanon.
Yep.
Or, for that matter, his both powerful and restrained attack in Iran. Yep. Netanyahu's greatest strength in Israel is that people believe that if we are really in danger, he's the person we prefer to be at the helm at that moment. He's the prime minister for danger. He's your default. Nobody has been able to replace him. Nobody. Not Gantz, not Lapid. None of them have been able to provide, when you're in some place in the Maslow pyramid, Netanyahu, his experience, his intelligence, comforts Israelis. The challenge is that more and more Israelis are realizing, and here I apologize, I'm going to be presenting now a political opinion. But I don't claim that my political opinion is correct. It's just my opinion. And in my world, the Hartman Institute works on the meaning and value and purpose of Jewish life within the boundaries of the State of Israel. We don't have policies on who should be the prime minister or what the borders of Israel should be. I have people on the right, I have people on the left, I have settlers, I have peace, I have everybody along the political map. But like everybody else in Israel, I have an opinion. Netanyahu now, I don't believe is a good man. He did phenomenal things for Israel. I never voted for him. But I could respect the things that he achieved. On many, many levels. Not just economically. I think he was a servant of the people. And I know as someone who had a child who was serving under Prime Minister Netanyahu, the chances of my child being safe in the army were greater under Netanyahu than any other time in Israeli history. He used military power unbelievably judiciously. Used in the past. Every operation in Gaza. He would come up with some fake goal, declare that we won, and say it's time to stop. He took war, power, danger. He was very, very careful. Barak, Omert were far more, not cavalier, but it was, under Netanyahu, less soldiers died per year than in any other time in Israel's history. You have to understand that. He's very, very careful. Something happened to him somewhere in the last few years. Could be his trial. Could be his wife. Because he's living in a dysfunctional household with people who are profoundly disturbed. And I'm not blaming them. It's just maybe whatever it is between his wife and his son. And in Israel, everybody knows everything. We all know somebody who's his personal guard. Like this is like in Israel, like everybody knows somebody who has like literally 0 degree of separation. Whatever is the reason, whether it's that, whether it's his age, this is not the same Netanyahu that we used to have. This is a Netanyahu who has translated his own political survival into the primary aim. And we know that he has made major decisions in this war solely in order to enable the perpetuation of his coalition. The Netanyahu of the past would never do that. That's not Netanyahu. He didn't do that. But he's done that this time. Over and over and over again. And we all know it. If Gideon Sa'ar, with his 5 seats, hadn't joined the coalition, shamefully, there is a chance that there might have been elections by May 2025. There's no chance for his coalition to fall. But, that said, On the one hand, he now surpasses Gantz and Lapid, but there is no chance for Netanyahu to form the next coalition. At least what we know at this moment. There's not one single coalition option for him. His 69-seat coalition now gets regularly in the polls between 44 to 49, 50 seats. It maxes out there. He can't form the next coalition. But he's the democratically elected Prime Minister of Israel. And it puts us in a difficult space. He doesn't take responsibility for failures. He surrounded himself with some very bad people, really bad people, both his coalition partners and in his party, who are creating a public discourse in Israel that anybody who doesn't agree with Netanyahu is, if they're outside of Israel, they're anti-Semitic, and if they're in Israel, they're disloyal and anti-democratic. And there is no debate against the content of what anybody says. It's all you're trying to create an upheaval, an anti-democratic. There's a total cancellation of anybody who's not on board with Netanyahu's leadership. And he has a whole collection of people in his party whose job it is to just spew hatred, nastiness, vile attacks without any reservation and without any shame, including against hostage families. I have a brother-in-law, Alav Shalom, who was held captive in Syria for 2 years. His body was returned after 2 years for 4,000 Syrians. But when you're at that end, you're holy in Israel. It's not just that everybody's on your side. It's just everybody knows that everything is secondary to you. Netanyahu gave 1,000-something people to get back Gilad Shalit, remember. But right now, since the hostage families are critical, they're now the enemy. There's nothing sacred right now. Nothing. The army, chief of staff, the people, you have to realize, when you say an army person, you're talking about people who have spent the last 20, 30 years working 20 hours a day to keep our country safe. But if you have a different position, you're a traitor. The Attorney General, the courts, the press, he and, I don't know what to call them. I don't want to say a not nice word. I do. Everything is fair game. Everything is being attacked right now. Everything is being attacked by him. And he is now a problem. But he's the democratically elected Prime Minister of the State of Israel, and he will be in power for the next 2 years. And the question will be how much damage he's going to do to Israel, how many kids are going to die. If his coalition requires the building of a settlement in Gaza, will he allow it? What's he going to do? There's a lot of uncertainty. Those who support him feel safe. The majority of the country, who doesn't, is in a very difficult place. I work very, very hard to both speak respectfully about anybody democratically elected And I also work very, very hard not to belittle the arguments of the people who disagree with me. And even though I didn't support Netanyahu, I took upon myself a practice of always speaking positively about his contributions, as I did tonight. Right now it's very hard. It's hard. Now, it's hard for us Israelis. I believe it's impossible for the next generation of North American Jews. I don't believe the next generation of North American Jews will stay in a relationship with Israel if we have another far right-wing government like the one we have now, elected in 2006. And frankly, they're right. Why have a relationship with an Israel that you feel violates your Jewish values? If you care about human rights, if you believe in an Israel that has to represent the best of what our tradition is about, now you can take problems. You can take imperfection. Everybody can. You can even take some form of ongoing conflict with Palestinians if you recognize that it's not just our fault. Like, we could talk about it. It's talkable. You know, reasonable, you could speak. I'm not talking about the people who believe that we are a white colonial power who deserve to be killed on October 7th. A plague on all their houses, and there's nothing that I'm going to say that's going to convince them otherwise. And there's almost no Jews who are part of that camp. There's some. There's always some Jews who do something. But I don't care about them. I care about them because I want to defend myself, but I'm not worried about the intellectual challenge of people who think that October 7th was a holiday. You know?
Double checking.
Something you is my response to that. Really, really. But that's not the debate in the Jewish community by and large. Jewish community by and large wants to know, does Israel stand for a good thing? Are we a moral country? What are we doing to Palestinians in Judea and Samaria, even if we can't achieve peace right now? Why are you expanding settlements and making any future? Like, if you're an American kid and Minister Smotrich is in charge of civilian affairs and defense in Judea and Samaria, you have to look and say, does that mirror anything that I was taught as a Jew? Is that my Judaism? When you have a minister of Homeland Security who's basically a fascist, basically, with receipts, as we say in Hebrew. Like, he's earned it. So if that is the Israel that they know, it's hard. And a successful Israel education for decades was to get people to believe it's complicated. If I could get you to believe it's complicated, we won. But it's getting uncomplicated. And for people, see, the war that you see and hear is not the same war that Israelis are seeing. And you're seeing things that are complicated, or that are, aren't complicated. There's some things. And the next generation of Jews have a right to a Judaism that could inspire them. They have a right to rabbis and teachers and experiences and curriculum that can make them feel proud to be Jews. They also have a right to an Israel and to a Zionism that they could feel proud of. But that's something you have to earn. And Netanyahu, of the last number of years, and if it continues longer, is an Israel that will have great difficulty earning people's respect and earning people's commitment. And in that sense, we have a lot to do. We have a huge, huge challenge. There's only so long you could disconnect Israel from its leadership. You can do that, it's not the same. But after 16 years, 20 years, with policies that can't be reversed, someone says, and when you're 6,000 to 10,000 miles away, like, for what? Like, why? And at some point, it's just not complicated anymore. And we have to make sure that we don't get to that space.
So speaking of that, my next question is about this interaction of the next generation. So, as you know, for the better part of 20 years, I spent a lot of time on bringing Americans and Israelis together through learning, through travel volunteering, and culminating with the Chavruta program that you and I helped build together. And for a while there, for all of us, when Americans and Israelis met, their conversation was pretty basic. Americans were dazzled by the Israeli aura of a proud and unabashed Jewish identity out in the open, audaciously defended and lived by kids a few years older than they were. And Israelis came here, and their eyes were opened by a living, breathing, unorthodox, version of Judaism that they had never seen before. Today, things are different for all the reasons you just said. How is the next generation of Jews on both sides of this relationship now encountering the other?
First of all, right now they're not. For the last year, they're not. The divides between Israel and North American Jews are greater than ever before in the history of the state of Israel. The significant divide used to be denominational. Like you. In Israel, I love it when secular Israelis say reform and they mean it as a curse word. Like, really? Like, if you would be worthy of you don't come up to their ankles. Like, you know, like, oh, you're sitting in, like, really? But that was, you know, Israel was part of Israeli society is you're religious or not religious. And not recognizing that you could be secular religious, conservative religious, reform religious. And the monopoly of orthodoxy on state institutions still creates a huge, huge dichotomy between North American experience of Judaism and an Israeli experience of Judaism. And most secular Israelis aren't invested enough, like you are, to build the synagogue or the experiences that you want to have as a Jew. They prefer to check out. And you only fight for religious pluralism when you want to be a player. If you don't want to be a player, you don't fight for religious pluralism. Right? Like, if you don't want to go to the Kotel in the first place, why fight for an egalitarian Kotel? Like, okay, you take it. But your experiences are different. That used to be a huge divide. Today, it's a slowly creeping. I've been feeling this and talking about it, and a lot of people don't like me for this. So that's the trigger warning. I don't know how to do all of your political correctness, but I try a little bit. Israel has been developing calluses over its moral conscience for a while now. It's inevitable. You might have all the reasons in the world not to create a Palestinian state. And I can name every one of them. But at the end of the day, when you occupy another people, it changes you. It just does. Even if you're doing it for the right reasons. I remember, I've lived a life, and a lot of things happened to me, and you know, when you're a teacher, you actually remember, things don't just happen. You remember where they are, what they did. And I remember the first time, it was in 1976 when I was in basic training in the Army. And they took us out of basic training, and there was some beginning of demonstrations in the old city. And they had us do guard duty in the old city. And I remember the first time, and I was a joke. Like, I weighed 105 pounds. Really. I literally weighed 105 pounds. I am almost legally blind. I only have one functioning eye. And the other eye now, because of a doctor in Boston, actually I'm able to see quite well out of. But at the time I wasn't. And they checked my vision and made me into a non-combat soldier. And so I asked to be retested. And I cheated. And I became a combat soldier. Eventually I became a tank commander, the eyes of a tank, which was kind of one of the more stupid things. But that's why you draft 18-year-olds. It's the perfect balance between physical ability and stupidity. 20, you're stronger but not as stupid. So it's like they got it down right. So here it was, me with these thick glasses. It was like people I don't know if they were supposed to laugh. I grew about 10 inches in grade 12. And I didn't have a muscle. I heard that there was such a thing. But it was a whole thing. And I'm like, Donniel, come, we're guarding. You have to go, now we have to protect. It was our first operational thing. And we were just in the army for a few weeks. Like, we knew how to shoot, but we didn't know diddly. Nothing. So a group of us were given the job of guarding Villa de la Rosa in the old city. Now, if you're ever in the old city in Villa de la Rosa, if you want to guard Villa de la Rosa, you don't stay on Villa de la Rosa. You go up on the roofs. But the only way to go up on the roof is to go through people's homes. To this day, I also remember. It's not here, it's at a different place in my body. We little pathetic soldiers were put together with a border policeman who was a pro. And I remember the first time coming up to a house, opening the door, and marching through someone's living room. And they're in the living room. Just going through. Now, did I have to go up on the roof? Sure. But I remember their faces. Here it is. They were laughing at me, but the other people were a little more impressive. But I had a big M16. And you're just marching through. Now, we were very shy. We were uncomfortable. We were also quite impressed by our uncomfortableness. We were touched by our moral superiority. But the border patrol man, he just walked through. You know what the difference between him and us was? He did it every day. And I saw it just does it for you. It just changes you. Just like the war in Gaza has changed Israeli soldiers. Our stringent rules of combat have been loosened in Gaza for a lot of reasons. It just changes you. And we're a society that has occupied 2-3 million people in Judea and Samaria. And they don't have a right to vote. They don't have access to a judiciary. They don't. And that does something to you. It just does. And so, even if we don't have a two-state solution because we believe that we offered and they said no, and we don't think we have a partner, and maybe we do and maybe we don't, which I won't get into now. The fact is that just like your generation of kids, a whole generation of Israeli kids grew up. Basically creating a society in which Palestinian lives are more transparent. That does something to you. Now, those Israelis are very different from your kids. North American Jewish life places moral responsibilities to others at the apex of what being a serious Jew means. How you treat people is what defines you as a Jew. Like Tikkun Olam, and we can make fun of it, and whether it really means, I don't know, because I don't know how to repair a world. I just know how to repair a neighborhood, my street stuff. But let's leave. But the idea itself is a remarkable idea. It says that my job as a Jew is to help people. That my job as a Jew is that if somebody's in need, I'm part of your solution. That's basic Torah that you teach your kids all the time. That's what you teach them. You even teach them that we cover the challah when we're making kiddush over wine. Why? Because you don't want to hurt the challah's feelings. Like, these are things, like, this is the ABCs of anybody who's had a Jewish education. Like, I'm talking about the committed Jews. And so there is a divergence. Now, post-October 7th in Israel, many Israeli Jews, not the right wing, everybody, doesn't know how to have a moral conversation right now. They just don't know how to have it. They're frightened of it. I teach about this all the time, and I aggravate people. But I figure I have my name on the building and the institute, so I can say anything I want to say. It's like sort of comes with being a prince, you know. I inherited my job, and I'm a prince, and so but I'm going to use it. So I talk. So I'm teaching, and I'm advocating, and a mother came to me after one of these leadership groups that I was running, and she says to me, Donniel, I'm really bothered. I'm with you. I'm really worried about what's happening to my son in Gaza right now and what it's doing to his morality and his soul. But I have to tell you, Donniel, when he comes home, I want to talk to him about it. But I'm afraid to talk to him about it because I'm worried that if I talk to him, he might hesitate. Do you know what hesitate means? That he might delay. She said, what would happen if because of my conversation, my kid dies? Like, that sort of encapsulates like this lady when she said, like, so besides the fact that we were both crying, like, just like, what am I supposed to do? Like, the only response to her is to cry and to hug her. In Israel, that's still politically correct sometimes. What else are you supposed to say? What else are you supposed to do? Israelis are worried that morality is going to endanger their survival. And there's a growing schism between an American Jewish community and Israeli Jewish community on this question. And in the long run, that is not sustainable. Now, it's much easier to maintain your moral principles when you're not in life or death situations. But again, it doesn't matter easier or not. It's a challenge. And how do we bring our two communities together is a major part of my work. And how do we learn from each other? And how do we understand the difficulties that Israelis are in, but still expect and ask, what does it mean? So, like, Jewish life is facing some really serious issues over the next coming couple of years, next decade. I mean, really serious issues that, by the way, nobody has an answer for. I have programs, but no one has an answer. I have a methodology. But if anybody tells you they have an answer for these questions, just walk out of the room as quickly as you can. There's almost a new Torah, a new way of talking about Israel, and a new way of being an Israeli, and a new way of relating to each other. It's going to require of us. It's not going to be solved by people-to-people programs and some sister cities. It's a little bigger than that. Like, those were good for one. Now it's a bigger problem. And we better get serious. Like, I can't tell you how much I appreciate your questions up till now. Because they're like, not only do they reflect it's like, this is like, we're at a serious time. We're at a really bad time right now. Not an easy time. And I didn't even talk about America. When I want to feel better, I think about you. No, I was like, that's your next one?
That's the next question. There we go.
Like I say, I have problems, you have problems. And then I say, thank God,
So speaking of us, I wrote after October 7th that for American Jews of my generation, I'm 46, it was a profound and chilling validation of our parents' views on anti-Semitism in the world and in the United States. To put it bluntly, they were right, and I was wrong, particularly my mother, for whom the war against the Jews was never ending. Is this the same old story, but in this generation, or is it different this time?
I'm an Israeli, but I'm also an American. But I don't live here. I pay taxes here, but I don't vote here on principle. I don't feel I should vote determine the political life of America. We know that you could have a right to do something, but you don't necessarily have to exercise all of your rights. It's not always right to exercise your rights. And it doesn't feel right to me. Like I'm invested somewhere else, and I don't feel like voting for me is a sacred task. And I have to bear the consequences of that. And so I am going to respond to your question. 40% of my institute's activities are in America. I spend 3+ months a year in America. 2 months a year, North American Jews descend. So it's not that I'm not familiar, but I still want to apologize. And I want to offer an analysis of something a little bit, but maybe it's 70% correct. Maybe. Maybe some of you might think it's less, some of you might think it's more. But with that, I think it's really important to recognize that this is not 1935. It's just not. It's not. Doesn't mean it's the same. I've been trying to think a lot about what's changed. And I follow 14 news sites 3 hours a day. It's part of what I do now. Every day, 14 news sites across the political spectrum. It's part of my Talmud now. I have to know, both in Israel, North America, and around the world, left wing, right wing, everything. And I've also, as some of you know very well that depending, if you only listen to one news site, you have no idea what the other part of the country is even aware of. And if you think, for example, that something is so evident, who here regularly follows Fox News? Follow it. Every single thing that you take as self-evident about Donald Trump has never been reported on Fox News. It doesn't exist. And vice versa, by the way. It's only recently, but this has been going on for years. For those of you who follow Fox News, you know, first, second, third, and fourth item is always about murders and rapes of immigrants, of refugees, of what's the word here? Migrants. It's talked about all the time. The dysfunction in the cities, the murders in the defund. It's a different. You open up one newspaper and you go to the other newspaper. So I spend multiple hours a day collecting information. And then I compare it with my conversations with people. I believe it is a self-evident fact that the increased anti-Semitism in America is not the same as Germany. And your mother's wrong. It's not the same. They had it objectively, they had it much worse. Just for example, in 1935, we wouldn't have been here. we wouldn't be here. The state would be your enemy. The police would be your enemy. Instead of having both a state, a government, and police and laws defending your right to be Jews. So now many people get angry at me if I say but let's just, and I'm not talking about people's experiences, I'm just talking if you read objectively, there could be, again, 357% increase in anti-Semitic events. It's not 1935. This is not the Holocaust. It's not even America of the 1950s or 60s with quotas and neighborhoods that Jews couldn't live in. It's not. I'm going to tell you something that might seem a little strange to you, but could you bear with me? And if I'm upsetting people, I apologize. And I'm going to come to what you're feeling in a moment. Do you know what anti-Semitism is really going to be like it was in the past? When intermarriage is going to stop. Do you know why there's intermarriage in America? Not because Jews are assimilating. Jews who are marrying non-Jews aren't assimilating at all. They're proud, vibrant, active Jews, and many of their spouses are equally invested in Jewish life. Again, that's just a fact. The reason for the increase in intermarriage in America is this is one of the first times in our history where non-Jews are willing to marry Jews. Think about it for a moment. In 1935, no non-Jew was marrying a Jew. Why would you want to marry a Jew? You want to check out a pogrom? Think about it a second. What would be, it would be an act of insanity. One of the realities of America is that for most Americans, we are respected and beloved. That's still true. It's still true. Christianity, by and large, is not the Christianity of our parents. Supersessionist ideology, even the evangelical movement, is not the same. Much of anti-Semitism, which used to be connected to Christianity, that's just not Christianity anymore. It's just not. Christianity did serious tshuva over the Holocaust. I could go in. It's just not. I walk around with my kippah in most places in America, and I'm still very comfortable and respected. America is an exceptional place. Non-Jews are still marrying Jews. I want you, if you understand the nuance of what I mean by that. We're not surrounded by haters of Jews. This is not Germany. And we have to give thanks for that. We do. But what's changed? But when you speak to Jews, and when I speak to you, as you wrote, you gave profound expression to something very powerful that Jews were feeling. But if this is not 1935, you still have a synagogue. You still have Jewish life. Vibrant. I'm not saying it's pleasant, but pogroms? There's some historical memory. But it's still, why are we so upset? Why do we feel that our life has changed? Part of me doesn't know. But part of what I'm thinking about, you'll tell me later if you think I'm right, we are coming off of 40, 50 years as the only minority in America which cannot be discriminated against. Every minority in America is hated by other segments of the society and discriminated against. culturally, legally, socially. Jews, for 40, 50 years, were the most privileged minority in the country. Our power, our position, our influence, and also the respect of the public discourse. You know, we had 3 Supreme Court justices out of 9. 3? Do you remember when Pat Buchanan got on television and said, "Don't we have a right to someone?" You remember, I felt these Jews got 3. Don't I have don't I have a right to one? I don't have one. Can I have one? And so I wrote, there's something. It's been a glorious time for Jews. It's now legitimate for some people to talk about the fact that some Jews, it's legitimate to kill them. That's a conversation that we haven't experienced in the last 40, 50 years. Now, you don't experience it in most of America, but there is a community of people, and we fear that it might grow. A confluence of certain intellectual, ideologically, but I believe morally corrupt notions about Jewish power and privilege, and about the rights of those who are underprivileged to perform morally heinous acts. You combine that together with certain Palestinian or Muslim or Arab ideologies and a few other groups, and our kids now go to places where some of us experience where somebody could look you in the eye, call you a murderer, threaten you, or celebrate the fact that somebody wants to kill you. The fact that in America, I don't know if many of you are old enough to remember when the Nazis marched in Skokie. So the Nazis, okay, we knew them. Okay, the small group, we're always nervous, but they're them, and that's not our problem. But there is within, when somebody could look at you and say that October 7th is a celebration for a Jew for whom Zionism or relationship with Israel is an integral part, there's something profoundly unsettling about experiencing that level of hatred directed towards us. And we have no experience with it. And I believe that some of us are overreacting. Or maybe Jewish history has taught us that there's no such thing as overreacting. Maybe that's what we're supposed to do. But I don't think we serve the Jewish community well by making comparisons between our reality and Germany. I think we're frightened. People are frightened. There's a hatred towards us that's allowed to be expressed. Some of it is being reined in, and some of it's we don't know where it's going to end. So I think there's an instability to Jewish life that we haven't experienced in North America in decades. And the question is, how do we deal with it? So the first thing we have to do as Jews is we don't deny it. And we don't poo-poo it. We ask ourselves, how do we defend ourselves? But please remember, when we want to defend Jewish institutions, who do we call? Who do we call? The police. In Germany, they didn't call the police. The police were the ones who were breaking. It's different. So how do we now respond to these dangers? It's going to require some wisdom. And just like after October 7th, when you're attacked, there is a trauma that doesn't allow you to be balanced It's just not natural. It doesn't allow you. You don't. But we're going to have to find that balance. How do we protect ourselves? How do we protect our schools? How do we protect our kids? How do we make sure that a Jew has a right to go anywhere without being threatened? But some speech, that there's going to be speech that makes us uncomfortable, that's also not, it's like there's a confluence of things that are going on that I think are going to require of us some adjustment. Like I am used to the fact that somebody wants to kill me. I get up every day in the morning and know that somebody wants to kill me. I'm left-wingish. Now it's center-left. I walk around with a gun. I have a gun. I'm not doing a Kamala Harris thing. No, I really do. I have a gun. And whenever things get a little dangerous, I feel a little uncomfortable. I'm a runner. And I know that when I hear footsteps behind me and I turn around, it's time for me to start carrying my gun. That's my test. When I'm running and I'm relaxed, good. When I turn around, Donniel, take your gun out of your safe, and I carry my gun. And I have a permit to carry my gun, to carry a concealed weapon. I don't do Jewish victimhood. I don't want anybody to say, oh, he was killed, but I don't. We're not for Jewish victimhood anymore. We don't do that. I know what it's like. I live with that. But it doesn't dominate my whole consciousness or my story, and that's part of the challenge of Israel. There's now people in North America who could openly talk about wishing you harm. It's true. Many of them just don't want to are canceling you, or are trying to separate you and defining, I'm not anti-Semitic, I'm only anti-Zionist. Without asking you if Zionism is such an integral part of who you are, like what am I doing? Even though not all anti-Zionism is anti-Semitism. Those are experiences that we knew about. It's now coming from other places. It's coming from some of the people who we thought are our friends. It's coming from the places where we're sending our kids and we feel most vulnerable. So I think we're going to have to learn. But I think part of the learning and coming up with strategies is to recognize, this is still home for Jews. Throughout Jewish history, Jews never invested in real estate. They didn't invest in real estate. When they needed to leave, they wanted to leave overnight. They had it in bags, diamonds, gold. American Jews, this is still your home. And it's still one of the greatest places for Jews to live in the world. It's not as good as it was 10 years ago. Something has changed, that's true. But how do we concentrate on protecting ourselves without overstating the experience? How do we take it into account, but still invest as we should in the values and content of Jewish life? Is going to be really important. So it's a hard time for you too. And our challenge is, how do we still retain our Americanness, our love for America, our appreciation for America, and our deep sense, you don't live in the diaspora, you're living at home. And you're not running and moving to Israel. So there's an incongruity going on, and I think it makes sense. It's going to take another couple of years till we find the right balance, because it's a new reality here too. And give yourselves the time to find the balance which makes sense to your life here and to the changes and to what maybe hasn't completely changed. And again, I apologize if some of my remarks seem completely at odds with what you're experiencing. Take it as somebody who, this is from far away and who visits here. What I understand, or what I think I understand today But I apologize if it was insulting to something that you know more about than I do.
Here's where I love that answer, is because for years and years, we go to Israel and they'd be like, how's the anti-Semitism in America? Because they would hear about it. And if you come tonight and say, it's unsettling, but it's not that bad, it's an opposite conversation than we're used to. So when I ask your question about how are Jews now interacting with difference, I think this is an example of an interesting difference where you and I might not see eye to eye.
Israelis love anti-Semitism.
Exactly, and here you are saying to us, maybe not, you know.
They love it when you have anti-Semitism. The only thing they report in Israel about they don't report about your shul.
Yep.
They don't report about what you're creating and the beautiful Jewish life that you're living. They don't report about the unbelievable Jewish life that exists in Boston and the cutting-edge things that you're creating. They don't report about it. They don't report about the beautiful work that Hillel or Moshe House are doing. They don't do that. It's not an interesting story in Israel. The only thing we report on is anti-Semitism.
Yep.
and intermarriage.
And here you are.
Israelis know more about the percentage of North American Jews intermarrying than North American Jews do. This is why? Because it reaffirms the Zionist narrative. The Zionist narrative is, what's Israeli solution to anti-Semitism in America?
Move to Israel.
Move. Move. I told you. You thought this was the golden Medina. It wasn't. Just like the Jews in Germany thought, you also thought, and now you know. It's good news for Israel. Because the Israeli story is, Jewish history is divided between Holocaust and renewal. Israel is renewal. Everything out of Israel is Holocaust. Either Holocaust that happened or Holocaust that will happen. It will either happen by an enemy from without or assimilation from within. This is core Zionism. That's the way they relate to you. And so it is, it reports, we love it, we talk about it. It also is, if our life, if our life is difficult, if your life is worse, our life feels better. It's one of the ways you solve your problems. Classic. To say, who wants to be, so the campuses, and we talk about the campuses, and I ask people, what's the size of America? What is the square miles of America? What are the square miles of all the campuses in America? Take the 10 campuses, 20 campuses. America, you talk about anti-Semitism in America, and what's the next thing that people say? The campuses. Even from afar, that's an analysis you have to be aware of. I'm not saying it's insignificant, but there's something going on. So here you heard it from an Israeli who said, we have it worse.
Well, I want to thank you again for coming tonight. We're up on time. I want to give the microphone back to Judy to finish up the evening. But Donniel, what a privilege to have you here with us.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much.
Again, Donniel, it's been a privilege to hear you. I've heard you many times, and each time I hear you, it's a privilege. I hope you enjoyed this evening. Again, my name is Josh Levis, and I'm director of Boston, and I look forward to other programs with many of you and with Shir Tikva. Thank you, Dan, for your amazing questions, and have a wonderful evening, and we look forward to being in touch.
Thank you very, very much.
There are also copies of Donniel's latest book for sale outside, just on those tables outside.